Tony, Zack, good to talk to you. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Daniel. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. So, Tony, tell me about the company that you run there in Myrtle Beach area and really surrounding areas.
So Mr. Sparky of Myrtle Beach, we've been here since 2010, but we've been doing electrical work in the area since 2004, actually, just under Mr. Sparky since 2010. We do mainly residential electrical service. We're located at 2318 Highway 544 in Conway, South Carolina, 29526, and we're literally right outside of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We service the surrounding areas, actually all the way up to Charlotte, North Carolina, to Georgetown, South Carolina, North Myrtle Beach, Little River, Longs, Ainer, South Carolina, Gallivants Ferry, Surfside Beach, Murrells Inlet, Pawleys Island, Georgetown again. And inland, we go as far as into Marion. And we have been servicing mainly residential electrical. We do some commercial business as well, where we'll go out and we'll help commercial businesses as well with any electrical needs that they may have.
That's awesome, man. You serve pretty much everywhere. So,
Yeah.
did you have time to go surf since you're over there by the beach?
Not as much as I used to, but I'm getting back into that, thankfully, for sure, man, for sure. My goal next year is to be in El Salvador by April.
Wow. Okay. There you go. A little warmer
But
climate.
I've got to get in better shape for that.
That's awesome. So we have so many common questions from, customers about electrician. And today I want to talk about those questions and ask them because so many people search the web, they're asking ChatGPT or whatever they use now to kind of, get their questions answered. And sometimes I feel like AI is just not there yet with getting the truth behind a lot of these questions. So today I hope to ask you the top 20 questions homeowners have about electrician work. And so let's follow up with the first question. This is more about safety and basics. So what are the most common electrical issues homeowners face?
So we see a lot of these in all of our territories that we service, but and they're everywhere, right? So mainly we see, homeowners face no power to certain areas of their home, whether it be a bedroom, kitchen, you name the room. Usually that's one of the number one causes is they don't have any power to a room. We also see a lot of GFCI receptacles not working or not resetting. We'll see everything. People have a big concern about lights flickering, right? And so we see a lot of that. Some people get real nervous to the touch of a hot to a hot light switch. We see those and receptacles, right? Receptacles can get warm. And a lot of times we'll see where people are just aggravated because their plug is literally falling out of their receptacle. It's not making good contact anymore and it worries them. Receptacles with burn marks, from somebody unplugging them maybe too quickly. Sometimes that can happen from a flash, from pulling out the cord. But mainly we see calls that require us to go troubleshoot and find out what the issue is. Because with
What
electrical, typically it's behind the walls. So they need a professional electrician to come out and take a look at that.
I've seen that before in my house where I touch it and it's hot. So that is a big problem you want to make sure you call an electrician for.
Yes. Now, to distinguish, right? So typically I tell people to use the back of their hand. It's more sensitive than the front. If you're feeling it hot on the front and it's not very hot, you can't really get a good justification. If you'll flip your hand over where it's much more sensitive, you can feel the heat a lot quicker. And if you can feel that heat and you don't want to keep your hand on it, then yeah, it's definitely time to get an electrician out there. You've got something going on for
Wow.
sure.
What if someone takes a plug, like for me in my climate where I'm at, sometimes when I put the plug inside, it sparks. Like, is that okay? Is it because there's a moisture in the air or what's going on with that?
Well, usually it's because you just made contact, right? And so sometimes you'll see where when you make a contact, there is a small spark when it makes contact. Usually there's no issues there, right? Now, if it produces a burn mark above the receptacle prong marks, you might want to get somebody out there to take a look at it. What I'm talking about, if you see a small spark there's no issue. You have no black soot coming up above the receptacle prongs. You're usually fine with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Let's go to the next question. So, what are signs my home might have an electrical hazard?
Yeah, so a lot of people, again, a lot of people are unsure of electricity, how it works and how it operates. So I tell people typically to look out for some of these signs. Number one would be flickering lights, right? There's usually an indication that we've got a loose connection somewhere and we're having a surge issue that we may need to come in and identify. Loose receptacles are another one that most people can easily tell by a plug not fitting well, and the receptacle no longer holds that. Maybe you just have a loose receptacle, right? Maybe it's time. How old is the receptacle? So, we want to look at the age of the actual electrical system as well. May not be a problem, but just still may go back to having that annual inspection once a year, right? Just to make sure that your system is safe. Another thing, if you see what I'll call cloth wiring. The outside covering of the wiring is cloth. We as electricians typically call that rag wire. That's an old wire. Typically, those don't even have any grounds, which is the biggest probably part. It's probably the biggest issue with any electrical system safety is making sure that everything in that home is grounded properly. So the cloth jacket, I would also say another issue that if you happen to be at your electrical panel and you notice that it may be a Federal Pacific, and there's a couple of other brands that we would say take notice of, right? So a Federal Pacific, very much an electrical hazard in anyone's home. They were outlawed in the 1980s, and in a lot of municipalities, you still see them. Now they require them to be updated before the home can even be sold, and that's an insurance thing. So another panel may be what they call a GTE Sylvania. You've got Zensco panels. We also have Kraus-Heinz panels. And so while those may not all be unsafe, except for the Federal Pacific, which is definitely unsafe because the breakers don't trip. These other panels are very much dated. You're looking at 50-year-old electrical panels. You may be able to find a breaker that is made for it, but we don't recommend those because they're not made by the manufacturer any longer. It's a third party that's come in, and usually those have issues with tripping hazards. They don't trip on time. So I tell people generally, if your home is approaching the 20, 25-year mark, then yes, definitely, you're probably going to have some electrical issues going on because, Daniel, here's one thing we know. Electrical system is designed to fail safe. And I say that because we know things are going to fail. They're man-made. And when they fail, we want the system to be designed so that they fail safe, right? When we know that they're failing safe, we know that we're not having any bad hazards going on in the home that could be, smoldering, any type of fires or anything like that, because it's designed to fail safe, and your grounding has a large thing, it has a lot to do with the safety of that house.
That's such a great way to put it. To fail safe. I think about parenting, a little segue. Man, I'm gonna use that with my kids. Like, how do I get them to fail safely? It's like create an environment where when they fail, it's a safe fail. So that's actually a really good unilateral way to look at life, kind of, right? Like, how do we fail
Yeah.
safely? That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, take it to electricians.
If only we could always fail safe, right? Sometimes we do have a boo-boo at the end of a fail, but as electricians, it's very important for us to know and look into the safety integrations into that home. And that's what's really so neat, because when you look at a lot of the things that have come out in the electrical world, I'll say in the last, since really the beginning of time, it's all about enhancing the systems to be safer, right? Insurance is a large portion of why our homes are so electrically safe, because they don't want to pay for a burned down house. So they are very active in making sure that the products that we're coming out with today's market, are going to make your home safer. And as electricians, it's our job to make sure that we educate our clients on what products there are that are out there that are safe. Whether they decide to do that or not, that's up to them. But we want them to be educated on the safety and how much more we can make their home safe with electricity.
That's awesome. So to end, this could be a great segue to the next question. But before we get there, so to wrap up on that one is if you have a 25-year-old or 30-year-old breaker or system, just hire an electrician, hire you guys to go out and just look at everything, making sure things are working properly. And if not, then obviously recommend what they need to do. And if you have a federal specific, call immediately because those are not set up to last any longer than what it is right now.
Right. Well, a joke amongst electrical or people that are in this industry is with a Federal Pacific panel, you can weld with those breakers because they will not trip. And so, again, fail safe, right? So circuit breakers are a large part of that safety feature in your home. And when they trip, they are doing their job. A lot of people are like, oh, this breaker's broken because it tripped. Well, no, we need to find out why it tripped. It tripped for a reason. Don't get me wrong, every now and then it is because of old age, but for the most part, it is doing its job. It's identifying there's an issue somewhere on that branch circuit that we need to come out and identify and make it safe.
That makes sense. Thank you for that. So segue to the next question I think fits properly here about safety is when should I call an electrician versus trying to fix something myself?
There are a lot of electrical codes. There's a lot that goes into the workmanship behind what electricians do day in and day out that a lot of people who are not actively engaged in the trade have no concept. I'll give you a fine example. When somebody has a receptacle or a light switch and they have the actual small cover plate is taken off of that. That is a huge fire hazard. And why? Because what this fire need, it needs oxygen. So we want to make sure that that cover plate is on anything where there's a junction, right? To snub out any intake of oxygen to put the fire out, right? Something that small. Most of your handymen or people that work around their house and do little odd jobs, they aren't aware of all the ins and outs of what we want to do. Again, fail safe. We want it to fail safe, and those are some of the items. Codes have been updated, right? And so, as a layman who's just dabbling with electrical here and there, or even a handyman, quite honestly, they're not engaged in the day-to-day practice of electrical. And so therefore, they don't know all the small items that we're going to be looking for. It could be something as small as a gap in your sheetrock that houses the receptacle that could be a big issue with that system. Your GFIs, right? GFIs should be self-testing now. We used to have a GFI that we had to go out and test it ourselves. So I tell people, look, I understand that a lot of people can go out there and match 3 wires, your black and white and your ground, right? But that doesn't mean that there's so much more into your electrical system that could be an issue when you're just thinking you're hooking up 3 wires, right? Are you doing it correctly? We like to twist solid wires together to make sure that we have a good fit. It's good workmanship. We're putting on the correct wire nut. I will say it's got a metal insert inside of it, which is making that connection secure. So when people ask me, should I get a handyman or should I get an electrician? Spend a little more, get an electrician, have that peace of mind that it has been done right and that your system is still safe instead of potentially having issues from somebody not being educated.
Yeah, a lot of common things is like, oh, honey, I can install the fan myself, no problem. Shut off the power and then do all the wires and go there. I know for me, I have dealt with, doing that myself here and there. But, it's always best to probably just hire the professionals because, you have this investment in this house that you bought and all of a sudden you create a fire and something that maybe you save $300, whatever, turns into now thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, if not lives at risk when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, and look, and I agree. I've always been handy around the house as well. But at the end of the day, putting in a ceiling fan doesn't seem like a big deal. But I'll ask you, is the box rated for that weight of a ceiling fan? Is it ceiling fan rated? I'll ask you, and I'll look to see if we've got any gaps in the sheetrock that that box is by, usually in the ceiling, because they know if a ceiling fan is going around it, they may do some sloppy sheetrock work above the light fixture because they know it's going to be hidden. That's a problem. That's an air gap that we can't really do a great job of sealing unless we see it and know it's there. Most homeowners have no idea. It looks fine. It's covered by the fan, but that air can pull in from an attic or from the second floor or whatever. Again, feeding potential part with more oxygen to create an issue. So I understand it's a ceiling fan, but just it's always best to call, get an estimate, get somebody to come out there and take a look. How often do we see those pictures online of a ceiling fan that has fallen? Is there a child underneath in the bed? I mean, is it really worth the, typically maybe $100 to $150 for installing the ceiling fan? Maybe a little more depending on the fan, but is it worth the safety of whoever is going to be underneath that fan?
Yeah, I agree. Safety is everything, and it's not worth trying to cut corners. So thank you for that. One more question. You kind of highlighted this in one of the questions we asked already, is how often should I have my electric system inspected?
I'm a big believer to have everything inspected annually, right? We've always inspected HVAC systems annually. Most people look at their, something to their plumbing. Maybe they're looking at their hot water heater annually. What's the heartbeat of your home, right? What is probably the most dangerous item that we have in our home? And we don't want to inspect that annually. Most inspections, well, they come with our club membership, obviously, but most inspections are not very expensive. They range in price from probably $200 to $500, but what kind of peace of mind is that? So, I think that a home should be inspected annually because, again, we could have water intrusion in an electrical panel when nobody really takes off their electrical panel cover in their home to look at anything. When an electrician comes in, he's going to take that cover off. He's going to check all the wires, make sure that they're sized properly for the breakers. Did you have anybody else doing work on appliances in your home? Maybe not, but if you did, maybe they put in the wrong breaker with the wrong wire gauge. That's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at all your connections going from your heavy appliances like your HVAC systems, maybe your washer and dryers, maybe where you're using a vacuum constantly. We're going to look at your light switches. We're going to make sure that they're not getting hot. We're going to look at your smoke detectors, which is your number one least expensive life insurance that's out there. We want to look at your GFI receptacles to make sure that they're still active and working. A lot of people have circuit breakers that are GFI rated versus receptacles. Well, receptacles have an end of life. GFI receptacles have an end of life. So when they quit protecting, they stop working. Breakers, only certain manufacturers have breakers that have end of life GFI protection. So if you've got a 30-year-old GFI breaker and nobody's sitting there testing it out, then it may not work. And the worst time to find that out, obviously, is when you need it to work, right? So that alone, if you have a GFI breaker in your home, requires, to me, in my opinion, to make sure somebody's checked that annually, because the GFI is there to protect somebody from getting electrocuted on a certain surface, right? We know concrete is a large conductor of electricity. We have GFIs in those areas for that reason. But let's think about all the homes that have slabs now that are built on top of a concrete slab. We know that that is a conductor. That's why the GFI was even invented, right? So annual inspections. Wires loosen up over time. We need to come in. We need to make sure that everything is still snug, because a lot of people don't realize that wires carry voltage, which carry hertz, which also cause micro vibrations. We can't see them. We can't feel them, but they happen all day, every day, and they're happening in your electrical. Well, we do know that when things heat up and cool down, we have expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. So there's another reason why we should be out there double checking the connections in your lugs and your main electrical panel, even, anything that we have access. We may not have access to your meter because that is owned by the utility. But everything from that point, we can inspect and make sure that you have good tight connections. And that's why we say,
That's good. I'm hearing even recommendation for even new home builds because maybe, if they're building a bunch of houses and maybe the electrician didn't do a good job on one outlet or he thought he did.
oh, yeah.
And so even
Yeah,
if you have a new house, you should get annual inspection.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And a lot of houses come with warranties. And I would say, look, stretch that warranty. Call, even if you don't get us to come out, right? It's all about electrical safety. So, if you've got a 1 year or a 2 year warranty, I'm calling that electrical company and seeing if they'll come do a courtesy electrical inspection. If they don't, look, you can call Mr. Sparky. We'd be happy to come out and do it. Our charge is very nominal and it is very inexpensive compared to what you have to lose, right? So definitely do that. I mean, if you live in a beach area, think about the corrosion aspect that you have. Well, it's copper, correct, but copper oxidizes. Aluminum, which is a large conductor that we use throughout. It doesn't matter where you live. Aluminum also oxidizes. So you definitely want us to come out and make sure everything's tight. That looks good. It's not corroded, not oxidized. Corrosion causes pitting. Pitting causes arcs. We have issues with that. So it's definitely in your best interest to do it. And I don't believe that a lot of people have done that over time because electrical materials used to be made a lot better than they are now. But, things, again, we want them to fail safe. So we need to come and make sure that the safeguards are there for when it does fail.
And it is an issue. I'm looking at some stats here. They're saying about 10 to 15% of fires in American homes are from electrical fires. So you're looking at 25,000 to 50,000 electrical fires in the U.S. alone. So that's a pretty big number, I think, to make sure you have somebody come to your house once a year to take a look at that to not be a part of that statistic.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've been told that when they come to inspect the cause of the fire, if they can't determine, then they determine that it's an electrical issue because that's typically what it is. They can tell if there's an igniter like gas or something like that, and they usually can tell when it's electrical. But if they can't find the reason, they usually opt to that it was an electrical issue somewhere in the home, and most of the time they can find that. But yeah, look, if it's your house, it's one too many.
Yeah.
It's just one too many. So yeah, we want to stress the need for those inspections.
Right on. So let's see here. The last question about safety is, and you kind of touched a little bit about this, is what causes breakers to keep tripping?
A lot of things cause breakers to trip, right? And so, one of the biggest calls that we have is to come out and troubleshoot for that very reason. I mean, is it the item that was plugged in that's causing it to trip? Maybe something internally is not right in the actual appliance that's being plugged in, and it could be as simple as that. A lot of people, again, they think that their circuit breaker is messed up because it tripped. They don't look at it as, hey, that just prevented something bad from happening, which is exactly what that circuit breaker did. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes circuit breakers do get old, right? If they've been tripping a lot or something like that, and you haven't had anybody coming out to look, they can get old and they can get worn down. But for the most part, a breaker's doing its job when it is tripping. And that's what people need to remember. You can reset that breaker and maybe it holds, but do you have peace of mind on why it's holding now and what caused it to trip in the first place? So I tell people usually leave it off, let us get out there and let's identify what's causing that to break. Around Christmas time, we see a lot of tripping circuit breakers and tripping GFIs from overloads of power with outside lighting, but also water intrusion into whatever may be plugged into the outlet. But we see a lot of circuits that have tripped around that time, and sometimes it's just a small nuisance. Other times it could be that there may be a staple behind the wall that nobody knows about that's pinching that wire. And finally, it has just worn it down so much in the insulation that now it's starting to arc with the staple. But there's all kinds of reasons for circuit breakers to trip, and that's why they should be investigated out, really to see why is it that it's tripped.
No, thank you for that. The next I'll go into power and performance, but before we go into that, hurricane season's around the corner, and storms and tropical storms. If they just do any of the things above, just having an electrician come by and look at it, is that enough to be ready for the storms to just make sure everything's going, or is there anything extra they have to do to get ready for the hurricane season that's coming around the corner?
As far as the hurricane season goes, I mean, typically for the most part, everybody's home's probably ready electrically, unless you're looking for backup power for a generator, for a portable generator. We really specialize in doing a lot of portable generator hookups for clients right before storm season, but we do them all year because, if we're already at your home, why not go ahead and get us to do something like that for you? We're making it utility safe, and that means that we're making the connection for your portable generator safe for your home, as well as safe for the utility guys, so that when they're working on those wires, the power you're producing from your portable generator is not going back into the main lines. And believe it or not, it can easily do that if you don't know what you're doing. So we install a lot of what they call generator interlock kits with receptacles. We advise our clients on how to set those up. Then we're also going to show our clients, hey, this is what you're going to be able to run on that portable generator, and educate them as to what appliances. You want hot water? Okay, well, if we only have 30 amps of power, we're going to cut all of these circuit breakers off and only have your water heater breaker on. When that water heater heats up, usually takes about an hour, depending on how long it's been down and out. Then you can turn everything back on. Maybe you have a larger portable generator and you can have a couple of other convenience items on. But we also install a lot of what I'll call home standby units, and those are automatic. So when utility power goes out, generator power comes on, it automatically cuts the utility off so that they cannot be injured as well while feeding power to the house. We install a lot of those all throughout the Carolinas, and those are really safe, and they are so convenient. You talk about peace of mind, not running around worrying about filling up gas tanks or LP tanks or anything like that. Just walking out, maybe cranking it up and exercising it to ensure that it's coming on with no issues before the storm. That's a great way to get ready for a storm, by doing that. But yeah, so as far as the other stuff goes, make sure you don't have obviously any cords outside. You want to also make sure that any receptacles you have outside are also covered with what I'll call an in-use cover. And what that is, Daniel, is that allows somebody to keep a plug plugged in, but it's totally enclosed and stops any type of rain from getting into those connections there. You may remember a long time ago, we had these little flip cover items that people had on the side of their houses. That never really kept any rain out, but it made us feel good that if nothing was plugged in, it was closed off. But we usually keep things plugged in and then just have rain on it, and that presented a big hazard as well. So
Yeah, we have them in our house. We have the covers that you have to take out the cover, put it in, it has a little hole, and it closes. Is that something you guys install for homeowners? Those covers are
Oh
all.
yeah, we put a lot of in-use covers in. I would tell homeowners, be careful in the spring. That's usually wasp and hornet season, and they love getting into those little holes and crevices and setting up a little nest in there. So make sure you've got a can of wasp and hornet spray. Our guys carry them all the time just because it's a detriment there. But yeah, those are great. They're very safe. They should have been out a long time ago. But yeah, we have in-use covers.
Right on. Well, thank you for that. So let's go into the power and performance of the electrical service. that or electrical work in your house. So why do my lights flicker sometimes?
Sometimes it feels like that can be a ghost.
That's what my
And
kids
we're
say. Every time
chasing.
it flickers, that means there's a ghost right there.
Yeah, we feel like we're chasing a ghost sometimes because flickering lights can be from so many different things, right? One of the first places we check are your large appliance loads, right? Usually your flickering lights are from a surge, right? So you may not see the brightness, you may see the dimness, but with electricity, when it seems dim, remember it had to get brighter before it got dim. You may not have noticed the brightness, right? Those are surges. So that's why we recommend surge protection because truthfully, surges can be generated internally in a home. Not as bad as what a power company may give you, but at the end of the day, we generate our own electrical surges sometimes. And that's also why an annual inspection is so important. Typically, flickering lights are from a loose connection. You don't, I mean, and sometimes honestly, it could be the actual bulbs, it could be the socket of the bulb, it could be whatever's feeding the bulb, it could be from the electrical panel and the connections in there. It could be from your metering outside that's got a loose connection that's also causing that. So it's a thorough diagnostic for anybody who calls us with flickering light issues. Happens all the time. It's either from poor installations, it's from old appliances, just a multitude of different things. That's why we say we're chasing a ghost, but you know, it's our job to find that ghost like the Ghostbusters there. So, you know, we just don't vacuum it up. We just try to tighten it up instead.
No, we had that problem in our house, and they said it's like imagine all these pipes running water, and there's a leak, and you got to go find that leak because there's a disconnection that's flowing through, and they ended up having to change the breaker. And once they changed the breaker box,
Yeah,
it fixed it. And so, not saying that's every single time, but like you said, you have to look at everything and try to
you
how do
do.
you decide, I guess, how do you decide where to start? It's like, okay, we're pretty close with this, and we're pretty accurate when usually when we fix this, the percentage is like 90%. Is that kind of like a percentage of how you decide what to change?
Electricians go by their old experiences, right? So, I mean, typically you always want to start at your main, at the heart, right? The heartbeat of your system, which is your electrical panel. You're going to go in there, you're going to make sure what you have what they call a neutral, as well as what we'll call a hot as well. And you also have a ground, and all of those play into the potential for your system to have flickering lights, right? So that's typically where we're going to start, and we're going to start looking. When do you notice it going on? Most of the people, just by asking our clients questions, right? We can typically start narrowing it down. I would tell you 80% of the time it's a heat and air because of the massive load that it caught that's created when it engages and needs electricity. It's a huge draw on the system. So you see the dikes dimming, right? But again, electricity works in sequence. And when you know, not to get too technical, but you have a sine wave and it's got to match. It's going to match on each side of your middle line there, and that's usually where we're going to be able to find the issue is what's happening whenever it dims. What do you notice? What kicked on? I mean, it could be something like your dryer, even a washing machine's a heavy load, even though it's on 120 volts and not 240. Could be a dishwasher, it could be all kinds of things. But when we get a homeowner really paying attention to, you know what? That's when I used this, or when this kicked on. It could be an old freezer. I mean, the old freezers, you know, people that have 20 and 30 and 40-year-old freezers, you know, those things take one heck of a look, right? So, I mean, those are the things we're going to be trying to identify right out of the gate.
Just asking the right question will help you get to the problem, which is what I'm hearing, which is awesome. So the next question is, what does it mean when outlets stop working suddenly?
When outlets stop working suddenly, usually it's because something internally in the receptacle has gone bad, or or it could be the circuit breaker that's gone bad. We could have had an issue with the wiring, like I had mentioned earlier. Maybe a staple is getting in the way of the correct flow of electricity to that receptacle. And it may be a GFI. So a GFI is typically a circuit, it's a circuit inside of that receptacle that's monitoring voltages. But GFIs always have a test and reset button on them. And they usually now have lights on them to identify if they're working properly or not. But usually if a receptacle has no power in the first place, I would recommend checking would be your circuit breaker box, your electrical box, just to make sure that the breaker didn't trip for some reason. If it tripped, then you need to get somebody out there to identify why it tripped, right? We know that in new construction, one of the faster, correct ways of wiring a home still is what they call backstabbing a wire device, right? So that's when they'll take a wire and insert it into a small hole in the back of your receptacle. And it's accepted, right? It's an accepted practice. And people do it every day, all day. A lot of the new homes throughout the country have been done with this for years. The problem is where that wire inserts into the back of that receptacle, it's spring steel. It's a very rigid steel, has a lot of flex, but when it gets old, it just continues to get more brittle, right? And remember, we talked about micro vibrations, right? So it's constantly, we don't see it, but it's rubbing against that spring steel, right? And so typically you'll see when a receptacle like that, usually the back of them are burned out. Again, good electrical system, if it's burned out, it contained that fire because we've got a cover plate on, the box is set in the wall right, and that stuff. So, you know, when you have a receptacle that's not working, I would definitely call an electrician, find out why it's not.
No, that's good. That's good. Next question would be, why does my home not have enough power for modern appliances?
Well, that's because we love appliances now. We've got to have an appliance for everything that makes life easy, right? So, you know, think about an old kitchen, right? We may have had a toaster. Most people didn't have a toaster oven. So we've got a toaster oven. Some people have ice machines in there now. We've got garbage disposals, garbage compactors now, microwaves, double ovens. You know, some people don't have the ability to have gas, so they've got, you know, two double electric ovens. We've got an electric stove here, coffee pots. You know, look at what we've done with coffee, you know, in the last 15 years, I would say. You know, we want coffee every which way in our homes. And some of these coffee makers are, you know, maybe they make espresso or they're scalding milk, you know, whatever. Those are big heating elements in there. So we love small appliances in our kitchens. And so therefore, you know, when homes were in, you know, I shouldn't say invented, but when electrical systems were looked at in homes back in the day, you know, they were called small appliance circuits, and it was recommended that you had two in a kitchen. You know, today you need more than two in a kitchen for most of your modern homes, just because we like to have modern convenience appliances. So you may need to add more outlets in the kitchen. Do not run extension cords because remember, you're drawing off the same power. So when I say we're going to add circuits, we're going to add dedicated circuits to other areas of the kitchen just to feed the new appliances. And so that you don't have issues of overloading the circuit, tripping the circuit breaker. We want to make sure that you've got enough dedicated breakers to handle all your small appliance loads throughout.
So if you have an older home, 50 years or so, it's not necessarily you're just adding another outlet. You're actually grabbing more power from the system and dedicating it so that it could hold the amount of electricity going through there.
Correct.
I used to think
Right.
it was just I could just add another outlet here, but so that an extension cord can work. And so you say no, that is not the answer.
Right. Well, you know, so if you're going to use multiple, you know, like, hey, we're cooking breakfast, you know, we're making breakfast. So, you know, obviously the stove's on its own circuit, but maybe we've got a coffee pot or some espresso machine going. We're using the microwave. We've got a toaster oven, not just the toaster itself. Now we've got a full-fledged 500-degree oven in our kitchen as well. Let's add more circuits not steal off of the existing, which is just really going to be a nuisance for you and trip breakers because you're demanding way too much power. So an older home, you'd be lucky to have two circuits in your kitchen area. Now, I would say on average, you're probably needing three, four, five at a minimum, just to make sure that everything's very convenient and safe.
So I have a follow-up question. So one thing that you forgot to mention in that list was cell phones and iPads and game consoles, right? And so in my house, we have like a section where we bought a little wood thing that you have all your phones, all your iPads, and we plug it in, and we have all this outlet that has all the devices being charged. What is the
Yeah.
safest and best way to actually have like a hub to have? We don't like our kids having any devices in their room, or even next to their sleep. We want them away from them. So what's the safest way to have a kind of hub for all these devices getting charged? And do we need a dedicated kind of circuit, for the device location to power up these devices?
Yeah, and what a great point, right? I don't have a house full of kids any longer, so, easily missed by me anymore. But at the end of the day, yes, it's great to have a dedicated outlet. And I would tell you, you also want to see about having some type of a surge protector for all of those devices. I mean, we're talking anymore thousands of dollars in these devices, right? So we want to make sure that they're protected. We do not want to have, some incident happen and it fries everything that we're sitting there trying to charge. The other side of that too is most of these batteries anymore to get this kind of light are lithium, right? Like, so you just alluded to the safety of that. I do know that they make safety boxes for these to be charged in so that you don't have to worry about having some type of an incident with a battery being overcharged or something like that. It goes into a case, and then that case makes sure that there is no oxygen for it to have a house fire, right? So I would say you can buy receptacles now that do have surge protection built into the receptacle, or you can use a surge protector into that particular device, right? They also make devices that have the C port, your not HDMI, but your USB right there together. But I still recommend you do want some type of a surge protector between your devices and that wall, in that out.
And are you fine then to have like a plug that has like five outlets that they can plug into? Is that okay to do?
Yes, that's okay. That's great. I mean, just make sure that it's a surge protector and not just like a five plug or five receptacle extension cord. Basically, I would always opt to get some type of a surge protector. My other advice is if you buy that surge protector, take a copy of your receipt. Make sure you look at the warranty information on it, right? They do have varying levels of that, but they're banking on you not having any of that info when there's an incident. Them not paying any type of claim on it. So do your homework, get a good device. You can research them online and then make sure that you keep the paperwork for those. But always with any sensitive electronics, computers, laptops that you may be charging for some reason, your TVs, stereo systems, any of that, always have one more layer of surge protection plugged into the wall for those items. It's very important.
So, what would be too many outlets? Because I go to like Home Depot and I see like 10 outlets, one plug. Like, dang, you can handle that. Like, what would be too much to plug into to one little outlet?
Right. So, look, if you've got 10 receptacles and a surge protector bar, more than likely you're probably not utilizing 10 receptacles in that. I think it's probably a little overkill if it were me. I think that if you found one with 4 to 5 receptacles, that would be fine. But you also, a lot of these are going to have their own circuit breaker as well because they're only going to do 15 amps and you may be plugging it into a 20 amp receptacle. Most homes anymore today are wired where the receptacles are rated for 15 amps, right? So, we do have items that are going to stop anything from damaging because of the circuit breaker built into your surge protector, or the circuit breaker in your electrical panel is going to stop anything from overloading the system, so to speak. My issue with a 10 pack of receptacles there is more than likely you will try to overload it. Think about Christmas time. Thank the Lord for LED lights now, right? Because back in the day when we were using all those incandescents, we're sticking them in, and how many plugs can I get? Well, we'll stick them all in there, and things would get hot, right? Especially if you're using a live tree. My goodness. So, yeah, I just say, use some sense, common sense there. Look at the rating on the device. I mean, if it's 10 phones, you're probably very good. I don't know how many people have 10 phones, but you may have 10 devices, right? Phones, iPads, or tablets, or what have you, watches, whatever, that could easily equate to 10, especially if you have a large family. So, just look at it, use some common sense, look at what you're trying to charge up. Most of those are what they'll call they're vampires as well. So they're always pulling a little bit of electricity, whether you're charging something or not, right? Because they want to be ready when you snap that device on. So make sure that you're cutting it off when it's not in use.
Right
And
on.
that'll help save a little bit of electricity.